Going to make a tank that you can use to fire. Now to do this, first of all you would of course need to load the graphics that I've given you, like so. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a tank base as my costume for my sprite. In fact, if I now click on costumes, I've got those cats that it always starts with, which let's get rid of those. So at the moment I've just got my tank base, which I'm going to get it to sort of drive around the screen. Now to do that, you probably would do this quite quickly yourself, but let's put some controls in. So for example, when the up arrow key is pushed, we actually get some forward motion. Now of course a tank moves very slowly, so perhaps we shouldn't get it to move too quickly. So there's the up arrow. Now you will notice that I'm doing this, and of course the up arrow, rather than moving forward, it's actually moving sideways. Now the reason for that is the direction that it's going in. You'll notice this line here. It's coming to the right, and that's the actual direction. So if I now edit this graphic, there's two things that I'm going to need to do. First of all, I'm going to need just to turn it right. So you will notice now, with this blue line here, I'll just click OK. Actually, you'll see it. You will notice that the line is now facing. So now, when I move the up arrow, it is actually going to move forward. Now the other thing I'm also going to do is let's set the costume center. So I'm just going to click right in the center there, click OK. Now what that's going to do is, when I come to rotate it, it's going to now rotate from the center point that I just set. So I've got forward now working. Let's go back and put a left and right arrow in. So let's try where's it gone? The left arrow, and get that to turn left. Now the question is, 15 degrees is not too much. Okay, and the right key, the right arrow, let's get that to turn right 15 degrees. So nothing really new as yet. So you're able to turn, and you're able to go forward. Perhaps the turning is too much. I might just reduce it to 5 degrees, so that this way it will turn a little bit more slowly. In fact, even 5 degrees you might argue is too big. Let's try 2 degrees. So now, actually that's better, because after all tanks can't move too much in one go. They are quite slow. That's better. So there's my tank. Well, certainly the basis that I can move around the screen with. Now of course I'm not going to have backwards, because there's going to be no reverse gear. If I want to turn backwards, I'm going to have to turn all the way around and move forwards again. Next thing to do is to have a turret that I can rotate. So I've already got some graphics here that I've shown you before, that you've downloaded. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new sprite. In fact, if I just choose from File, now I could use the ones that I set, but instead what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and find where I've saved my tanks, and I'm going to do the turret. And for some strange reason there's a dot there, so if I just edit that, you'll notice that I can change the graphic here. In fact, let me just erase that little dot there. I don't know why that's there. And of course what I also need to do on this one is again rotate it right, and then of course, just like before, set the center. Now the center I want is right in the center there. The idea is that when I come to rotate it, it's going to move around this point. I don't want it rotating anywhere else. So now when I click OK, I've got a turret. Now what I want to do there is to get the turret to point towards the cursor. So what I'm going to need to do now is have a bit of control. and certainly when that's clicked, we're going to have something happen forever. And I think I want the turret to point towards the mouse, so that's going to be a motion. So point towards the mouse pointer. So now when I click on the green flag, you'll notice this is very similar to the eyes thing. Of course, it seems a bit strange that the turret's here. In fact, if I put it on top of the tank and then of course move forward, it leaves the turret behind, which obviously is a little silly. So there's quite a quick way to do this. Is you'll notice that on the turret itself, I've set it up so that it's always pointing towards the mouse pointer. Well, what I'm also going to get it to do is to go to, every single time, go to sprite 1. Sprite 1 is the base. So now when I click on the green flag, it should actually go on. You can see that it's rotating. However, when I now move the tank itself, it's always staying with the tank. So it gives you that lovely idea that you've actually got a tank that you can control by its sort of base, by turning and rotating, as well as using the mouse to actually control the tank itself. Now, before I go any further, what I might do is just shrink these graphics a little bit. You may decide that you'll agree with me that let's just stop that. Shrink the other one as well, and let's click on that again. So now, when I click the green flag, I've got it turning around, but now at least the tank itself is a little bit smaller. It doesn't seem too big. Let's just stop that. Let's now put a target on the mouse. That's going to be a little bit of fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new sprite this time, and I'm going to create a little target for it. So let's use the ellipse, and let's choose circle so it's not filled in. Now if I draw a circle, if I use the shift key, it should give me a nice perfect circle. Now that's not too bad. What I can now do is just draw some lines as well. In fact, if I just draw a line like that, and another line like that. Not perfect, maybe use the eraser just to tidy it up a little bit. Whoops, not too bad. Now of course I would need to set the costume center, so making sure it's in the middle, I think, which it more or less is. It is now. Click OK, and now I've got myself a target, which again probably a bit big, so let's shrink that down a little bit. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now when I hit the green flag, what I want it to do is I want the initial target to follow the mouse around. So let's do that now. Let's just stop that before it irritates us. So here, what I want to do is I want to have a control, when clicked, forever, just in the same way that I had the turret go to the base of the tank. I can get this to go to the mouse pointer. So now when I hit the green flag, you'll find that the mouse pointer is always a target, which looks quite nice. The easiest thing to create is some form of missile for the tank to shoot. So I'm going to create yet another sprite for this one, but this time I think I'm going to just get you to draw it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you to draw a sort of grey box like so. Just set the costume center so that's right in the middle. Okay, click OK. So you've got a little bullet, and the idea is that this is now going to shoot out of the tank, so it should look quite nice. So how are we going to get this to do it? Well, let's have a control for the moment anyway, at the very least. Let's have a, so that when the spacebar is pressed, what we're going to do is we're going to get the bullet to first of all go to, what shall we get it to go to? We'll get it to go to sprite 2. Now, sprite 2 is the turret itself. Now we want it to point towards, well, what do we want to point it towards? Well, we want it to point it towards the mouse pointer, because after all, that's where the turret's pointing. Then, I think what we will need to do is perhaps get it to glide. This is the actual graphic. Get it to glide to the mouse pointer itself. Now, where is the mouse pointer going to be? Well, it's going to be probably where the sprite is. It's going to be the exposition of this sprite, because after all, the target itself is where my cursor is. So that's quite handy. So let's go back to the bullet. So what I want it to do is to go to the coordinates of sprite 3, because that's my mouse. So I want it to, now where can I get that from? Is it going to be sensing? Yes, I think so. This one here. So the exposition of sprite 3, that's where I think I want the X to go to. Okay, you can see that. And just temporarily, I'm just going to click on that so I can see a bit more of my code. It makes life a little bit easier. Okay, so I want it to go to where the Y coordinate of the mouse, and of course the mouse is always going to be where sprite 3 is. So it's going to be, this time, the Y position of sprite 3. Okay, now I've done that, I can click that into place. Okay, so now 1 second. Not sure how fast that's going to be. Let's get it to have a go. Let's go back to normal screen. Click on that. So now when I hit the space bar, it does fire. That's quite nice. Although I can see it coming through the actual turret itself. Maybe I would say it actually needs to speed up a little bit. So let's get, rather than half a second, maybe 0.6. Let's see if that's better. So hit go. I would say that even that's too slow. That's 0.4. Let's try that. That's a bit better. That's nice. Now I don't really want it coming through the tank. I want it to come at the end. So I think what I'm going to do, let's just hit stop. Again, go full screen so I can see a bit more space. I think, so point towards the mouse pointer. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it to move so many steps forward. I'm not quite sure whether the 10 is going to be enough, but let's have a look. Go back to normal. Green flag. I don't think 10 steps is going to be enough. Let's make it 30. Let's try. No, that's still not enough. Let's make it 60. Does that look like it's coming out the end? I think so. That's much nicer. So now I've got a tank. Of course, the bullet then comes to the end. That's, I think it's quite flash. And of course, just to show you, just to prove you to it, the tank, of course, still moves at the moment. Well, I think the firing is not quite over yet. What I also needed to do is, once it does get to the target, I really need some form of explosion. So, I'm going to come back now to my costumes here. Now, you'll notice that I've got Sprite 4 currently selected, and I've only got the costume that I made. But again, I'm going to be quite lazy on here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag in Explosion 1, Explosion 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and finally 9. So I should now have my first costume and then quite a few explosions. So let's think about that. So what I really want it to do is when it fires, it gets to the end, it glides to the position. Let's just make that full screen. It gets to the end position, then I want it to cycle through the explosion. So I think we had repeat. Now how many costumes did we have again? I think we had 9. That's right. So I think what we'll do is if we say repeat 9 times, well, actually if I say repeat 9 times and then go to looks and say next costume. So now I think actually at the end of it I perhaps need to hide at the end. Whoops. So once the explosions are done, it disappears. But of course, whenever I put a hide in, I really need to say put a show. Otherwise, it'll always disappear. So go back to normal screen. So now when I hit this spacebar, you'll notice that it doesn't seem to always be firing bullets now. It's so obviously that 9 wasn't quite right. So is it 10? Let's try that. Let's put it back to 10. I think it's probably mistimed now. So we're showing this. Yeah. So I think what I need to do now is perhaps get it to go to the costume right at the beginning of costume 1. That was the bullet. So now I think let's try it again. So it fires. Yeah, that's much better. Yeah, I like that. I'm not going to go too much further. I think just a couple of things I'm going to point out before I finish. For starters, of course, I could put a nice background into this, and you will notice that backgrounds are best if they're 480 pixels by 360. And what I've done is I've just given you one background, but it's probably not a great one. In fact, I'm sure what you could produce would be much, much better. But at least this way now it gives it sort of a more of a terrain look. Now what else could you do? Well, maybe have some form of scoring system. Maybe have a car. Maybe give your opponent a car or something that they can race around, and you can try to fire at them. Well, you know how to do the cars, and I don't think that's too difficult. Have it so that perhaps it delays, that maybe once it has fired out of the tank, maybe it has a few seconds delay to give the car a chance. But I'll leave you to now think of some other niceties that you could give this. Yeah, I think wouldn't it be nicer if you could actually use the mouse to fire rather than the spacebar? Maybe that might be a nicer thing. Let's do just that. So instead of having a spacebar, what we can do is here, when Sprite 3 is clicked by the mouse, now bearing in mind, sorry, the Sprite 3 is the mouse. When you click on it, what can I get it to do? Well, I can get it to broadcast something. Now let's get a new broadcast, and let's say fire. Now what is that actually doing? Well, it's almost like somebody saying, right, let's click the sprite, and then somebody shouts fire at the top of their voice, and then of course somebody else is listening, and when they hear that they can then do something. So if I now go back to my bullet, so instead of having the space key, what I can do is I can listen out for when somebody shouts the word fire. So if I now get rid of the space, let's take that off. Get rid of that. So now, when I receive, or like when I hear somebody scream fire, then I can get it to carry out. So let me just show you that again. So here, when Sprite 3 is clicked, broadcast, or in other words, scream fire, and then of course my bullet's waiting to hear it. So now let's just test to see if that works. So if I do it here, click the mouse, and I can get it to fire. Much better than the spacebar, I think. Okay, I do think I really need to stop, but actually I just had another idea. What about having an explosion when you actually see the flames. Let's hear something as well. So if we go to sounds, now I'm going to import something now, or if you're really lazy, you can go to where I've got my graphics. I've also given you an explosion sound. I've just dragged that in. The other alternative is to import and find where it's stored. So if I just play that, I've got a nice little explosion, and that's given the name explosion as well. So now what I need to do is if I go to the scripts and have it so that perhaps if I go to sound, I want to play an explosion. Probably I want to start it just as the thing actually explodes visually. So now let's just try that. If I now play, perfect.